So today shouldn't be anything like really radical. It's just putting these sequences into the calculator again for real world scenarios. Like for example, let's say that you are given $5,000 that grandma invested because she's like, you know what? I want you to learn about investing at your age. I think it'd be good for you. So I'm going to give you $5,000 towards college, but you have to invest it. And then you can be like, geez, how do I invest? And then you get an account for it. And then you're like, oh, what should I invest in? You decide to invest in a couple of stocks that you think are going to do well in the long run. And so you invest this $5,000. You should know where to put that in your calculator. And you should know that since this is a real world problem, we're going to use U sub 0 for that. Because when time elapses, like 1 year elapses, that'll be U sub 1, see? So we start with U sub 0 is 5,000. Also, you should know where this goes in the calculator. And we're going to make it grow by, well, let's be realistic. The stock market on average has averaged about 8% over the long haul. Over like 50 years, the average is about 8%. So I'd like you to put whatever in here you need to.
Growth or decrease?
I just said it a second ago. It has averaged 8% over the last 50 years. 8% growth. If you think the average has been decreasing 8% every year, that would be a pretty bad place to invest, wouldn't it? So it's increasing by 8% every year. Now, this last part, you're going to put it in a table. No, actually, it'd be way smarter to not put it in a table because I'm going to ask you to find me what would this be worth if you didn't touch it for 30 years. So grandma says, don't use it for college. I want you to wait. In fact, I'm going to be even more like grandma does this, I think would be a pretty cool thing for like a 15-year-old kid and say, I want you to invest that for the next 50 years. So that would make you 65. And I know that seems like really old, but I'm 56. It's not that old. You'd be, if you go 50 years from now, most of you will be close to 65, which is about when you'll probably be thinking about retiring. So it'd be pretty handy to have some money when you're about to retire. It'd be nice to have some money in the bank. All right, so I know it's so far in the distance. A lot of kids are like, I can't even think about that. I can't even barely think about next week, much less what life is going to be like when I'm 65. But we're going to say 50 years, so that's U sub 50. And that's how I do it. I type it on the screen. I wouldn't go on the chart and arrow down 50 times. That's a huge waste of your time. So if you just type in U parenthesis 50, it'll tell you how much it's worth. Now, for those that could not get this, here's what you should do. You'd add 1 plus 0.08. I know that's 1.08, but you could have typed 1 plus 0.08 right there. And I'll even tell you how to put it in the calculator in a second, but you should already know. So let's see if you can do it without me telling you exactly what goes on the 3 lines of the calculator. I'll tell you that in a minute. How much money would you have if your $5,000 grew at 8%? Pause while you give that a try. I wasn't recording there for a second, but we figured out that this is what should have been in the calculator. It's easy to forget those parentheses. It's also easy to use the wrong minus sign in it. If yours is not working, there's 2 negative signs on the calculator, or one's for negative, one's for minus. You should be using the minus sign there, not the negative key. And even that N, if it's the wrong N, it would be wrong. You don't want a capital N, you want a lowercase n, and that button is found right next to the alpha button. All right. I personally would not go to the table and scroll down 50 times. I would type lowercase u, parentheses 50, enter to get that answer. Okay. Now, we did a lot of talking about like how to rearrange that thing. This next one, I'm just going to give you this facts. You put them in, get the answer. It should take you less than a minute. Ready? Okay, imagine that you have $400, but you invested in something that is a really bad idea and it goes down in value. I could give you some examples in the real world. This is just my bias right now, but I think if you invested in some car companies right now that are kind of like struggling, I think you might actually lose 10% per year. And because those car companies that are struggling because they can't like figure out how to make electric cars, for example, in a few years that's gonna be really hard on them, and they're gonna like lose investment in that. So I'm gonna say lose 10%, minus 10%.
What companies?
I'll pause the video for a second. So you got $400 invested this time. You're losing 10%. I want to know after 50 years. U sub 50. What's it worth? Your investment has gone down to almost nothing, but it won't be nothing. In the real world, car companies do go out of business. It could happen that you'd have nothing, but. All right. You just had to touch a couple numbers, right? I mean, most of it was the same, so you just had to go back, tweak a couple numbers in your formula, and Keegan, what did you get?
2.06.
2.06. Can anybody verify that number?
Yep.
All right. Wouldn't that be pretty crushing to have $400 go to $2.06? And you might be like, well, it was only $400. What if it was $400,000? We'll add 3 zeros. And if we add 3 zeros to this, 400,000 could go to only $2,000. So a person who could have had $500,000 only got a couple grand left. That happens if you just keep it in something that was a bad investment over time. This happened to my grandma. She owned a company she owned this stock called U.S. Steel. Why did she stay with it and just hold on to it for like 50 years? Because my grandpa worked for U.S. Steel and he had some stock in it when he died. And she just held that stock because it was like selling it would be almost like, betraying her old husband because he had worked there. And so she just kept it and kept it and kept it, and it kept going down, 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 down. And so grandma used to have a lot of money. And then eventually it did this kind of a thing. Now they didn't wait till it was 50 years of going down, but it was like 30 years of going down. So moral of the story is they should have got out of that earlier, but it's really hard sometimes for sentimental reasons to get out of something that's just goes down, 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 because you just think, well, now, next year it'll turn around. Okay, so I'm just trying to share a little bit about investing because I think that some of you guys will invest someday and it might be interesting to you. All right, so let's actually get to a couple of the slides here. Go to this one. Notice, remember me talking about this the other day? 1 plus, that's for growth. 1 minus, that's for decay. So if you see this in your formula, don't get fooled into thinking that's 75% growth. Most of you be like, nah, I'd never do that. I know that's decay, but it's not 75% decay.
It's 25.
25. So the way I would do it is write it as 1 minus 0.25. Would you agree they equal each other? But this one makes it more clear that it's 25% decay. I think this is the smarter way to write it. I'm not going to force you because they are equal, but I would write it this way because I know what the mistakes kids usually make, and it's just usually a quick dumb mistake in their head like, yeah, it's decay because it's a decimal, and it's 75% decay. No, it's not. It's 25% decay. So if you just write it as a 1 plus or a 1 minus, it's really smart. All right, moving on to this page. In 2006, a new kind of problem. We have never had one where they give us a year. So right away, everybody write this, U sub 2006. That's the smart way to do it. Could you do it with U sub 0? Yes, you could. But this will be so much easier because if you want 2020, then you can just go U sub 2020. See what I mean? So start with the year as your N. U sub 2006 is 1,500. And I did use those powerful words always. You will always use u sub n equals u sub n minus 1 in parentheses. And then I said it'd be smart to use parentheses 1 plus or 1 minus. In this case, it's increasing, so it's plus. And be careful, 1 plus 3? No. 1 plus 0.3? No. 0.03. That's what 3% is. And then, if you set it up that way, you could just figure out u sub 2020. Use that on your calculator. I wouldn't want to look at my chart because it would just confuse me. Besides, you know where your chart would start? At 0. You'd have to hit the down arrow 2,000 times. So you don't definitely want to use the table for this one. U sub 2020. Now I get, this is a little bit weirder one, so more people are going to make a mistake. Please put it in the calculator. I'm going to walk past, and you're going to show me U sub 2020, and you'll either know how to do it or you don't. I'll give you 2 chances. If I walk past and it's wrong, I'll give you a chance to go back and fix it. Maybe ask the kid next to you. Yay, we got around. There was just a few kids that were having tech issues. Can somebody that still has it up on the screen, would you raise your hand and just tell me the number again? I saw it like 5 times, but yes.
2269 rounded.
Rounded, thank you very much. And it is a number of people, so it would make sense to round it. Some kids pointed that out. Good point. So 2269 is how many people are in the town. It grew. It grew from this to that, and it grew by 3%, and all that makes sense. Okay, good. So basically, that's it, except the problems get harder and weirder. But let me make sure you get this. If you can take any word problem and turn it into a set of numbers, like if I can take this complicated thing and figure out that it's actually 15, 25, 35, if I can find the first 3 numbers, to get from there, it doesn't even matter how complicated the problem was. You can go, oh yeah, I'm just adding 10 each time. And then you can do this like a normal sequence. So find the first 3 numbers that the problem will give you. And then you can take any weirdly worded problem, turn it into 3 numbers in a row, and then it's either arithmetic or geometric, and it won't be that bad. All right, so let's talk about this one. Seems easy because it's got a little kid's blocks up, which seems like it should be like very elementary. But it's hard to figure out what are the first 3 numbers. 15 for the bottom row of the blocks. See here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This was just a stack of blocks. It just didn't happen to have 15 on the bottom. This one only had 8. Okay, so but I get the idea. There was 15 in that bottom row. So my first number is 15, comma. Then each row has 2 fewer blocks. Doesn't that make sense? They're like going to make a tower out of it. It should have less blocks. The tower that's shown here, this little tower right here, that's only got 1 less block in each row. But this other tower, it's got 2 less. So then if you can figure out the first 3 terms, it's going to be easy. It's got 2 fewer blocks. Okay, so, well, then 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, and then I'm off to the races. I got my first 3 terms. So what is the actual question? Suppose that there are 8 rows in the tower. Oh, so this was row 1. Do I want to call that U sub 0 if it's row 1? No, in this case, I would call it U1 for row 1. And that'll force this to be U2 for row 2. Do you see what I mean? You had to pick whether it's 0 or 1, and no, there's no easy way to just say, always use 0. Nope. If they're telling me the first row is 15 and they want to do 8 rows, like what's U sub 8 or whatever, and it's smarter to use U sub 1, you have to decide whether it's smarter to use a year, like 2006, or 0 or 1. Those are the 3 that it always comes down to. Either start with 0 for most real world problems, or start with 1 if you're like counting things, or start with the year if they give you the year. Put it here. Okay, good enough. On to the next problem. We did one like this before. Can you just write me the equation for it? Would you start with 0 or 1 and then put the starting amount? You have to figure it out. And then write me the rest of the equation. All right. You should have known it was un minus 1. I'm putting in a subscript. If you have parentheses around it because you're used to like typing into the calculator, that's fine. That means subscript. Is this growth or decay? It says that it is losing 1/8 of its value each year. 1 minus 1/8. You could put 1/8 here, but be really careful you don't end up like screwing it up in the calculator. 1/8 is 0.125. You might want to do that. Now I know some of you were like, I don't know what to put there. Didn't I tell you to put 1 minus something? Didn't I say that was a smart way to do it? Yeah. If it's decreasing, losing, you do 1 minus something. And then what's the something? It said 1/8 of its value. I just happen to have that one memorized, but I could use a calculator. 1 divided by 8, 0.125. All right. The tricky part there was being able to remember that I said put in 1 plus something or 1 minus something. I did say you could do it however you want, but my way is not dumb. You would have known to go 1 minus, and then you would have just gone, oh, 1/8. You'd have put a 1/8 right here, it would have worked. All right. Did anybody remember that on a real world problem like this, we start at u sub 0? Who had a u sub 0? Good. Did anybody remember to say n is greater than or equal to 1? Any human in the room? Two people, 3 people. Oh, 4. Looks like 4. 4 kids remembered the domain. Do you get how easy that is to forget? On the test, you will lose at minimum 5%. Just for forgetting that. And it's so easy to do. You just make it 1 bigger than whatever you started with. Okay? So easy to forget. Literally, 85% of you would have lost 5% on the test right there. Don't forget the domain. Okay, moving on. She starts out with 50 bucks. She earns 20 bucks each week for doing chores. How much will she have after 8 weeks? Well, it starts with 50, and you don't just add 50 each time. What gets complicated here is like, how do you like label it? Like, should I start with u sub 0 or should I start with u sub 1 or what? So I'd write the first few terms out. She'd have 50 when? When we started. Was that at the end of the first week? Nope. She says she starts with 50 bucks. To me, that says u sub 0. If it had been, she got 50 deposited after her first week, I would have gone U1. But if it's at the very beginning, she has 50 before you even do anything, U0. And then I'd write the first 3 terms down. 50, and then 20 bucks more, so 70. 20 bucks more, 90. If you write the first 3 terms down, it'll help so much on these problems. Because then you're like, it's just adding 20. No big deal. UN minus 1, add 20. What did I just subtly do wrong right here? It's little, but it would screw up your calculator. The parentheses, that'll mean times 20. Okay, parentheses will tell your calculator to times by it. If you're doing increase or decrease problems, like the 1 plus or the 1 minus thing, you put those in parentheses. But that's different. You're going to multiply that in that case. In this case, we were just adding 20. All right, so there's plenty of places to really make subtle mistakes that can cost you. I think we're done enough that you can go right to the homework. So this is the part where please find your homework that is posted for today. I believe it is a worksheet, or is it a Schoology quiz?
Quiz. Oh,
Okay, it's a worksheet. So would you please find the worksheet? Would you please read me number 1?
Suppose the recursive formula u of 0 equals 100 and u of n equals 1 minus 0.2 times u of n minus 1.
I like to put it like this, but it's okay if they put it in front. 1 minus what?
0.2.
0.02 or 0.20?
0.20.
Okay. And you don't have to have that extra 0, but I like it there because it helps me go, okay, so that's 20% decay.
Where n is greater than or equal to 1.
Oh, that's just the domain. Okay, now what?
Models of bouncing ball give real-world meanings for the numbers 100 and 0.2.
All right. What is 100 if this is about a bouncing ball? Yes.
How high up it is?
Yep, that's how high up it is. Now, it hasn't been super clear whether that's the starting height you dropped it from or whether that's the first bounce. Get how that's kind of a like badly worded question? Because I don't know whether the 100 is what it started at or how high the first bounce was. See, that's not really clear. So if it's what it started at, I'd use u sub 0. If it was the first bounce, I would have used u sub 1. Because after a bounce happened, you'd have 1. All right. Now that wasn't super clear. So I need to probably look at the key to figure out which they meant. So I'm going to pause while I do that. We looked at the key and they said that this key starts with u sub 0. That means they meant before it started, the ball was hovering 100 off the ground. Could be 100 meters, feet, inches. It probably says in the problem, but it's hovering 100 before it drops. So we use u sub 0. All right. Okay, I feel like you're started. That means you're halfway done, but I'm going to tell you something to skip though. You better open it back up. Let me tell you which ones to skip. Let me go down to like, so I can see the whole thing. Thank you. Perfect. All right. This is definitely one where we can skip a bunch. We're going to do 1 through 5, and that's it. Just 1 through 5 is all you have to do. The end.
Nothing else, not like a review.
I am not planning on assigning any more than that. These are kind of like, they take a while. It sounds like you worked ahead, and that's not going to hurt you now. The extra practice won't hurt you, but 1 through 5, and that's it for today. Pausing for a second.